Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus coming at you with another video. So we have a couple of interesting topics that I want to cover tonight, and hopefully will enlighten everybody or expand your minds, or maybe do the opposite. I don't know. Sometimes I always wonder, am I making people smarter or am I confusing people? Not always so sure, but hey, sometimes out of confusion we learn the most. So that's the way I see it. But always, big topics, crazy stuff to think about. Usually I'm just offering my opinions. When I can, I'll back things up with research. I do more of that in my books, as you know. Or sometimes the interviews, which, by the way, if you have not seen the interview with Mark Pitstick a couple of videos back, I do highly recommend it. That particular interview really just drove home how everything that we talk about in this channel is the foundation of science, including hard science, including something that is very close to even unequivocal proof of the topics we're talking about, which is actually what we are discussing right now from something that our moderator on the group, John Adam Jackson, brought up on the group a couple of days ago. So I want to highlight this post as well as a question submitted by one of our patrons. Before we jump into these topics, you are watching Afterlife Topics, please hit that subscribe button if you like these types of videos. Subscribing, sharing, hitting that notification bell, all that stuff really helps. Also, a quick shout out to all of the patrons of this group. You guys really have helped keep this thing going, help keep me sane as I find myself trapped in crazy parts of the world. And also a special shout out to our super patron Brad. I haven't been able to reach out to you, buddy. I've sent you some emails. If you want to chat or anything, or get involved, or work with me or anything, you're welcome to reach me or send me an email. And I really appreciate all of your amazing support for this work that I do. So thank you very much. I hope you're watching this video. Okay, so to continue, let's take a look at the post by John Adam. So this was on April 8th, and he asks, are we meant to really know about the afterlife? On the one hand, there never quite seems to be absolute incontrovertible proof, but then again, the evidence is compelling. If the higher powers, whoever or whatever they are, don't want us to know, then they aren't doing a great job. But if it's not off limits as such, then why such murky waters? It's an interesting dichotomy, and if information is being controlled or rationed by so-called higher powers, then who are they, and why don't they just block it all out? So initially or immediately my thoughts about this is that this relates again to the Star Trek Prime Directive. We are a less advanced race than a higher dimensional astral race is. We are the backwater of the universe. We are I don't know. It's like we are going through that remote village, and people don't know what the internet is, and they don't know what pop culture is, and you just go in there and start handing out iPhones to everybody. That might cause a lot of problems. Same analogy could be used again in Star Trek. You go to a less advanced race and you give them, I don't know, holodeck technology, and that could completely destroy the civilization, right? They all become addicted to the holodeck, and it just destroys all of them. There's many considerations like that, and so I believe personally, it's just my opinion, that there are hierarchies on the other higher dimensional sides that regulate almost all of this stuff. And almost from just a logical perspective, it would seem that the way around those regulations is that we do the work ourselves to get to that point. It's the same thing in Star Trek. So in Star Trek, once a species develops their own warp drives, then it's possible to make contact with them without violating the Prime Directive. Don't ask me how I know all that stuff. I'm not even a huge Star Trek nerd. I just have a weird recollection of TNG episodes from when I was a kid, because it was a really awesome show. I still love TNG. I was still binge watching it as early as a couple of years ago. I don't know about any of these newer shows, including the new Netflix series. I hear it's really bad, but that's probably too controversial a topic to bring up here. I digress. Allow me to continue. So using again the Prime Directive analogy, so if a race builds a warp drive, they can be contacted. Well, maybe it's the same thing here, but instead of a warp drive, it's just us collectively deciding that we want to make contact and we want to know the truth, in which case they will be there and they're not going to suppress the information from getting out. And Kim LaCapria makes a really good point in the comments, basically directing to my interview with Pitstick a couple videos back, where the hard science is really broken down. We could argue that the information, or rather, I'm sorry, the experiments being brought out by Gary Schwartz and his associates at the University of Arizona is the absolute proof of an afterlife. It's direct proof of spirit communication. Fence sitters can probably wiggle around with that and be like, well, what are spirits? Are they really deceased people? How do we know this? How do we know that? In which case you kind of just have to use Occam's razor and go with it. These probably are not some Doctor Who bug-eyed villain pretending to be our deceased loved ones. It probably really is them, and that's what that information is demonstrating, and it is absolutely true. I mean, it's like Pitstick talked about, the p-values of these experiments is off the charts. There's no way that this stuff is a result of chance or anything like that. And now, the issue then, as I point out here, is just, can people accept the proof when it comes out? And I think the answer is no. That we can have incontrovertible proof of the afterlife, but it's not going to penetrate people's skulls. It's not going to get in here because it's too much for people to comprehend or understand or be able to fully think about, except the people whose minds are already a bit expanded enough to be able to accept this information. Currently, it's clearly a minority of the population. But with strong educational resources, we might be able to fix that. It's why I have this little channel. It's why I have my little books. And maybe y'all watching, you can follow in my footsteps if you want. Make your channels, start writing, and helping educate people about this kind of stuff too, because we can at least see how many people can start to take seriously this kind of information. That's my feeling about that. So can there be proof? Yes. We already have a level of proof. But, obviously it's not being cosmically censored by higher powers. I think they have protocols. They're not going to just pop in everywhere and say, hi, we're higher dimensional beings. No, I think they have to work within boundaries. But if we're making our own experiments, we're doing all of this, then we're well within those boundaries and there can be proof. Now it's up to us to synthesize that knowledge. Okay, so the next topic is by one of our patrons, Adrian. Hi, Adrian. Sorry it's taking a while to get back to you on this one. And it concerns a really, really interesting email I got, and it has to do with the concept of selfishness. Does selfishness have some kind of a cosmic metaphysical value, or should everything always be service to others, service to others, service to others? This is in relationship to the channeled work, The Law of One, which I was citing a few videos back, and talking about the nature of that dichotomy of gaining access to higher dimensions, as well as sort of your relationship with God, if you will, through the path of being either of service to others, or the dark side, the path of the Sith, being service to self. And is service to others always a good idea? For example, as Adrian points out, service to others could be used as a guide by an oppressive regime to persuade a population that they should serve their masters as good slaves. Well, I will say in that case, they are in fact service to themselves. They are not service to others. They're just using the illusion of that. To be of service to others, you have to feel within your heart that you want to do good for somebody else, not because you want something in return, not because you're trying to get something, but because you can't feel it any other way. And I think a lot of us are this way, right? So you're not going to do something bad to your friend, your neighbor, or a stranger because not because the only thing you're worried about is getting arrested. It's because you don't want to see something bad happen to that person. Now, people who are complete sociopaths, they might only be dissuaded because they're worried about the police catching them. And those are very dangerous people, right? But for most of us, we have enough empathy that we're not going to behave that way. But similarly, service to self may be a necessity in situations where self-care and acceptance is required after a history of self-denial or self-hatred. So, I do agree. I don't think, and I don't know if this was fleshed out very well in that one channel material, Law of One, about, is there actually a purpose behind service to self? But what is made very clear in those books is that to be of a higher dimensional level, to be able to access higher planes of existence beyond even just like the astral, they refer to the astral as like fourth density. beyond just that level of existence, to access even higher levels, you have to be able to elevate yourself using basically love, empathy, positive thoughts, space, all the stuff that we know about already through spiritualist literature. And they equate it as being only 51% service to others and 49% still selfish. And so it doesn't say, to seek out 100% selfless behavior. And I don't think that would be healthy personally, just, from the perspective of this world. We all got to think about ourselves. And we got to think about ourselves before we can help and do good things for other people, right? So we can't be 100% selfless. Not only would that be impossible, and probably somebody who claims to be 100% selfless is really just some kind of a raging narcissist. But in addition to that, we can't really function if we can't take care. We can't help somebody else unless we can help ourselves first. We have to put on the inflatable life jacket or the oxygen tank in the airplane before we can help the person sitting next to us, right? Same thing. But we can't take that to an extreme and start becoming more selfish than selfless. So there's a little bit of a balance, and to just be lean a little bit in favor of being selfless while still taking care of yourself and thinking of yourself too. And according to the Law of One books, that's the right formula to be able to exist on a higher dimensional gradient. And the implication being is that the vast majority of us on this planet are actually leaning too much towards selfishness. So they're not saying don't be selfish. What they're saying is just lean toward being selfless, lean toward being empathic, and don't become too selfish. Right? Makes a lot of sense, especially back home in Los Angeles. A lot of people on the highways could really use that advice. Back when there were highways, remember when there was a civilization and there were roads, people did stuff and there were cars. I remember that. It was a very interesting time. I can't say I completely miss it. Apocalypse isn't so bad, but so that's kind of my thoughts about this. I don't think I'm doing justice to the email. There's probably more I could touch on, but I think Adrian's point makes the most sense. To grow spiritually, I think you need to serve both yourself and others, but in a way that is growing in love, so heading north and covering both east and west. By growing in love, you naturally want to serve yourself and others equally. I agree. And I will finish this off by saying, as I mentioned in the prior video, it doesn't mean that we pass over and become omniscient and know everything, and suddenly we become pure love immediately, because that would defy the whole purpose of a soul's growth. We know that doesn't happen. So when you hear New Agey sources claim that we can do whatever we want here and get away with it because we become instantly pure love when we cross over, again, be very, very careful, because we're going down the road of misinformation. In my opinion, in my analysis, as somebody who reads books, looks at stuff, and thinks about stuff. Doesn't mean I'm an expert. I'm just saying this is my perception, that I gather from going through lots of material and having lots of my own experiences in the afterlife, which like I like to talk about here. So there you have it, a couple of good topics to bring up for you guys. If you like this stuff, be sure to subscribe, like the video, share the video, or head over to afterlifetopics.com. Pick up books like Understanding Life After Death, some good reading as we all pause and think about our own mortalities during the great crisis of 2020. Hopefully not the great crisis of 2020 and 2021, but I will say this. Given that history is repeating itself, and in some places we're even seeing prohibition again. Here in Philippines, they've now made drinking alcohol like outlawed in this whole city. So we got prohibition, we got this great pandemic. It is time to bring back 1920s fashion. So I highly suggest, get on Amazon, grab that Greta Garbo hat, and let's bring back the glory years of 20s fashion again. And in my opinion, that would be the best way to have a little renaissance once this crisis ends. So again, grab that Garbo hat. What else did they wear back then? Like what's that? What's like the bowler hat, right? Were the bowler hats? Was that 20s or was that like 1900s or 1800s? I don't know. But I did like 20s fashion, at least on the girls. The guys had like pinstriped suits. Okay, yeah, that's not so bad either. Anyway. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope these topics are of some benefit to you, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.